friends, this is Caitlin. Welcome back to Possum Stamps YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be playing with the new Mandala stamp set. This is so gorgeous and has so much detail packed into one main feature. I'm starting out by taking a regular piece of heavyweight white cardstock. I have it cut in half and then cut one of those halves in half again so that I have an A2 card base, an A2 sized front panel, and then my other A2 sized front panel I cut into 3 inches and then, you know, what's that, 2.5 inches, just so that I could stamp this stamp 3 different times. I didn't need to waste a ton of cardstock because the first layer is teeny tiny. I just want that center circle section. So that is what I am stamping now. I did add a tiny bit of adhesive tape to the back of my paper just to make sure that it stayed in place for me. I stamped my image with embossing ink, and then dusted it over with white detail embossing powder. And I'm just tapping off the excess, and I will heat set that once I use my printer paper to just pour my excess powder back into the container. I did make sure to heat set any of the powder that got on my image, not just the section I'll be using, just to keep things nice and clean and tidy so I wouldn't have extra powder kind of falling off all over. But the main focus of these is just that center section. So for this medium one, I'm doing kind of the floral shaped section, kind of the medium middle area, repeating that same process, going over it with the embossing powder and embossing ink. And I did treat all of this cardstock with anti-static powder first to make sure that I got a nice, clean, crisp image. And then I heat set as I went just because I figured it was easier than, you know, risking me bumping or putting one paper on top of another. I don't know about you, but I am notorious for doing stuff like that when I am working at my desk. So the last one, I did the full mandala, although this is a good like 5.5 by 5.5 kind of square circle shape. So on the sides of my panel, my mandala is cut off. I knew that going in, and so I just made sure that my panel was lined up to as close as in the center as possible. And even if it's not perfect, I think it turned out pretty good. The last step for my heat embossing was to emboss this I miss you. I just love how small and sweet and simple this sentiment is, and it fits perfectly into that center middle circle section. So I am going to ink it up to kind of match the colors that we use there, and everything will go together really nicely. I know a lot of people color mandalas with crayons, colored pencils, or markers as a way to relieve stress, but I really wanted to ink blend these and see what kind of beautiful blends and combinations I could get and kind of keep it more of like a tie-dye feel. So that's why I decided to go ahead and heat emboss these, and I did it in the white so that when we're done with our inking, we can wipe it off with a paper towel, and most of the excess ink will come off of those white areas, and you get this beautiful white kind of crisp look coming through all of that color. I just think it's such a beautiful kind of technique, especially to use in the summertime, because all of those bright colors with all of that light white just reads as super fresh and happy to me. For this first inner circle, I'm combining seedless preserves with picked raspberry oxides, and I did decide to go with the oxides just because I thought I would get a much easier, smoother blend without having to do as much work. For the middle flower kind of shape section, I did a layer of squeezed lemonade over the whole thing, and then went back in with the spiced marmalade on the inner circle to get a little bit more of a punch of color there. And later on I will end up coming back to add even more of this, because once I layered it all together, you really couldn't see the orange. It didn't stand out enough when it was put up against the purple and pink layer. So I'm just wiping with a paper towel in between each application. And for my biggest full mandala section, I started out with twisted citron in the center and kind of pulling out into those petal kind of shaped areas. Then I went in with salvage patina and kind of created these V shapes, blending out that twisted citron. And then in between those V's where there's rounded kind of petally edges, that finish out that last layer of the mandala, I'm going to go in with that Uncharted Mariner just to bring in a little bit of an extra pop of blue. And I love how these three colors work together. This on its own would be completely stunning. You could just do this layer with a blend like this, and I think it would be beautiful, but I do like having the other colors added in as well. So I just went back and forth between all of my brushes, not even adding more ink, just kind of blending and softening between the colors, and then wiping that off with a paper towel, and you can see that just makes that embossing a little bit brighter. Then I went over the sentiment with that seedless preserve so that it would coordinate with that inner circle, and then it was time to get everything trimmed out. So I did fussy cut each of these layers, and honestly that's how I picked where to cut off each layer, was what would be the easiest to physically cut. So I just did the plain little inner circle for my top layer. That medium yellow one you can see in the background there, I'm going to follow those bigger rounder petals just because I thought they would be a lot easier on my hands for fussy cutting. And you can see I'm trying really hard to keep my scissors in place and rotate my paper. That's the easiest way to kind of get a nice clean cut. And by checking in on each layer before I keep going, this is where I realized that that orange is completely lost. You don't even see it at all. So I did go back and grab some of that spice marmalade, and I'm just pumping up the color on right up against where that pink circle is going to go. And then I checked in with it one more time, and it was exactly how I wanted it to be. So there we go. Now you can see that orange. And then I trimmed out the last section. This one I didn't fussy cut right up against the line. I did leave a little bit of a border, which I was planning on. And so when I did my ink blending, I made sure that I ink blended around my image enough that I would have color there to play with. And I think that it worked out perfectly. So I used my wire trimmer to trim out my sentiment, just getting pretty tight and close there into those words. I wanted it to fit inside that circle and kind of just be nice and neat in there. I adhered my first layer down with some tape runner and just lined up the edge because I knew that it would be flat, and I knew it was already the right size. It was an A2 card base, so 5.5 by 4.25. That I was cutting from, so I knew it would fit perfectly across that whole card. Then I added foam tape to each of my other two layers. This is pretty thin foam tape, which I wanted because I knew I was going to be kind of doubling up. That top layer was going to be technically 2 layers thick, and I didn't want my card to end up too bulky, but I do just love the little bit of extra interest that this gives. And on camera I'm not sure that it really gives a huge punch, but in person you can really see that extra depth, and I think it just helps really bring that whole mandala to life. So once I got everything lined up, I added my sentiment onto that front part with just some liquid glue and just got it centered up. It does kind of take away from that actual flowery feel in the middle, but I do not mind that. And this was beautiful. I could have left it here, but if you've seen any of my videos before, you know that I am a sucker for the Possum Stamps sequin mixes, embellishment mixes. So I grabbed some of my favorites out of my stash, and I started out with pink on the inner circle. I believe it's the bubblegum mix. I'll show them all at the end too. And I'm just showing you them going into place because me sorting through all of the sequins to find the colors that I wanted did take a minute. Then I grabbed Campfire, and I used one of those orange shades all the way around, kind of tucking under that pink circle, which I thought was really fun. That was the coolest thing about this section of this card, was just figuring out where I wanted to lay everything and kind of how I wanted to feature each color all the way through. You can also see I have 2 different teals. I only ended up using the lighter one. The darker one just didn't make sense for the placement that I kind of was going with throughout the whole thing. So I have the Sunshine or Sunshiny Days, something like that. I have the Captivating Cactus for my lime greens, and then this really beautiful blue, which is that sparkling mint. So I have that Cotton Candy, that's what it is, Cotton Candy, Campfire, Hello Sunshine, Captivating Cactus, and Sparkling Mint. So I just love going through and adding all these in. I kind of tilt my card up in between each color to make sure that I didn't forget any and nothing's falling off. And that is my card complete. So I hope that you're feeling inspired to get inky, get layering, get sparkling. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button and that you're following Possum Stamps over on Instagram as well. And I hope that you have the most amazing week. Thanks for coming to hang out with me, and happy crafting.